First, if I consider the importance of this COP, there are 3 or 4 basic elements where countries are negotiating. The first is NCQG. I mean, the countries will set a new target for comprehensive finance goal for addressing all the climate change action. When you talk about all the climate change action, it includes adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage. But loss and damage is not included to the NCQG so far. But when we talk about adaptation and mitigation, the finance requirement is huge, trillion. But the countries in Baku and also in the last COPs, they're just talking about the process. Process means what will be the modalities, who will implement the fund, how the fund will be channeled. But the countries are denying to accept or to set a figure, quantified figure for future climate finance goal. So without having a figure, if we only agree the modalities and also process, it is meaningless, because you have maybe set governance or mechanism or many different elements, but there is no fund. So there is a demand from the developing countries that first we have to set the goal, maybe build trillion, then we can decide in parallel how the fund will be spent for adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage. So this is a major debated issues here. On the other hand, we established a financing mechanism. Now it has been renamed as Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage at Dubai at COP28. But there are many unjust elements in that fund. The unjust elements are the fund will be resourced voluntarily. There is no obligation by the developed countries for providing fund to loss and damage fund. The fund also referred many funding instruments like loans, equity, and also all the illicit funding instruments are referred by loss and damage fund. So there are many unjust elements, and we consider that keeping all the unjust elements, that fund cannot ensure or deliver justice to the climate vulnerable communities. Our demand as a civil society group that the fund should be modified. I mean, the mandate, the governance structure should be reformed, and that should be aligned to the convention, not to the Paris Agreement. Because when you talk about convention is justice based. There is a reference of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capacity. There is a country group between historical responsibility and also those who are not historically responsible. There is also a call for polluter pays principle. But when the fund has been established, I mean loss and damage fund has been established under the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is a bottom-up agreement. Paris Agreement does not have strong obligation for the developed countries. That's why when we talk about justice, Paris Agreement is not an appropriate place for delivery justice for the climate vulnerable countries. The concern is that whether the UNFCCC process is delivering the desired outcome or not. My take is that COP is failing to deliver. The other concern is that the Paris Agreement is not that much built on the key elements of UNFCCC. So Paris Agreement will fail fulfilling the requirement of the most vulnerable communities in terms of adaptation finance, and also loss and damage finance. The other concern, when we talk about fund, this is not only quantity but also quality. When we talk about quality, then we need to ensure that developed countries will not double count their money. Developed country will make a proper estimate or reporting of their financing delivery. So there is a huge concern of untransparent reporting system by the developed countries. On the other hand, there is also huge concern from the recipient end on the accountability of fund. We are saying that we need money, but we are failing to ensure that that money is benefiting to the climate vulnerable communities. So there is a gap from both ends. From the developed country, this is accountability gap, transparency gap, and from the recipient end, from the developing country, this is also accountability gap, because the money is not benefiting to the climate vulnerable communities. So this is not just asking more money, this is also should ensure that money is benefiting to the climate vulnerable communities. Otherwise, what we are talking about, climate justice will not be established. The fund has been operationalized, but not under the UNFCCC, because if I refer other funding commitment by the developed countries that has been channelized through bilateral process, they name some funding as loss and damage fund. But when it will go through the fund for responding to loss and damage. This is another calculation. So countries need to come up with their national mechanism. When you talk about national mechanism, this is national plan. What is the national estimate? What is the national requirement of loss and damage fund? And how this fund will be spent for addressing loss and damage. So the next question is developing national governance setting, institutional setting around loss and damage, then claim for money from the UNFCCC funding mechanism. So I think in the next 1 or 2 years, countries should give more emphasis on the establishment of national mechanism for addressing loss and damage, then can claim money from UNFCCC funding mechanism. This is one concern. Another concern is that this money is not sufficient. This is only 750 pledged money. Pledged money means the pledge has not been fulfilled. So we need to really emphasize that the money should be operationalized from the scope, and we also need to emphasize that many countries will commit to that fund. Not 100 million, it requires around 100 billion. So we demanded that from 2025, loss and damage fund should scale up from 400 billion to trillion. So there is a huge gap in relation to commitment and also expectation and also demand. The major concern is that the fund is not obligatory. This is voluntary contribution. And for voluntary contribution, we just ask them. So that you put money to that fund. So countries are not putting money. This is a major challenge. The another challenge is that countries are referring all other monies as loss and damage fund. For instance, humanitarian fund. For instance, social safety net program. For instance, disaster risk reduction money is also counted as loss and damage fund. So in the end, countries may say that they provided $100 billion for loss and damage, but they are not actually loss and damage fund. So when we talk about UNFCCC process, we follow some guideline and system. And as I said, for guidance system, we need to develop national process, national mechanism, national institution. So it might take time. But the other concern is that you establish national process, you establish national system, but there is no money. So then everything will be useless. Major concern is that you need to ensure that there is a money for loss and damages. Then you can ask the national government to scale up their governance structure, institutional structure to access those money. So one will complement another. The PNG, what has been withdrawn from crop, this is very logical because there are many elements of frustration because there is a fund for loss and damage, and loss and damage is absolutely compensation. But from this fund, we are seeing that this is not compensatory money. This is a business as usual development money or loans or equity or disaster risk reduction or social safety net program. So you just name all other existing funding as a loss and damage fund. This is completely unethical. There is a concern and debate. We also trying to, debate in national context. That's why we talk about adaptation. Adaptation to what? Adaptation to the anticipatory climate change risk. So anticipatory climate change risk is flood, maybe riverbank erosion, maybe cyclone, rainfall anomalies, others. So the adaptation will reduce the risk. But again, there are some elements that can increase the risk. The elements are without not having a proper institution, not having proper governance, and also implementing some project that destroy ecosystem and also natural habitat, causing maladaptation. There are some projects in Bangladesh, also maybe other countries, that are infrastructure-based projects. When you talk about infrastructure-based project, infrastructure causes displacement. Infrastructure somewhere causes waterlogging. So all these are not aligned to the principle of adaptation, and they are termed as maladaptation. The other concern is that governance and corruption. We also need to address those. So the risk of climate change is triggered by other challenges. We need to address those. So adaptation is not just targeting the risk, but also targeting to the other challenges, which is constructed by political system, political economy, and also, economic priority and society. My expectation from this COP is not that much because if I compare this COP to the previous COPs, COP is failing to deliver the expected outcome or result. But there are some procedural progress. and procedural progress are lingering the process. My expectation is that COP, we need to really focus on other issues, for instance, transboundary issues, and I'm starting to talk about transboundary issue because when you talk about adaptation, particularly in Bangladesh, adaptation will not be sustained if we fail to address cascading risk of climate change, transboundary impacts of climate change. For instance, if I refer to the floods in Kumilla and also other parts of the country that affected countries in 2024, and we faced, 13,000 crore taka loss and damages. So maybe we build adaptation, resilience over the 30 years, 25 years, raising the household plinth, alternative livelihood development, but on a sudden, maybe within 3 or 4 days, heavy rainfall, all are washing away. So because we are not have a kind of proper collaboration with the regional, upstream countries in relation to rainfall data or regional adaptation practices and other things. So for adaptation, yes, it is locally led, it is context specific, but again, we need to really talk about the regional issues that are hampering our adaptation activities. This is one concern. The other concern is my expectation is that reforming loss and damage. Civil society will raise their fires to reform the institution and modalities of loss and damage fund. And the last expectation, yes, it has been started. Maybe some countries are already saying that COP is not delivering because COP is a kind of consensus-based decision-making process. But when we look into the consensus-based decision-making process, we prefer the lowest preference, lowest option, not the highest option. So decision should be based on science. Decision should be based on the consensus of majority parties, not by the all parties. So my concern is that COP will include those things, and we also assume that a good COP builds on a bad COP. If I consider this COP as a bad COP, but yet we cannot say this because still we have 1 week ahead. So, but again, we need to keep our hope because this is the only multilateral process to talk, to discuss, and to take decision. But that process should be more robust, should be more active and strong.